My name is Jacob. I am a 38-year-old man like everyone else. My health started to suffer since I had been sick of the monotonous work grind since I was younger. I chose to retire early, before I was 40. I went back to my lovely seaside village, which I had left when I was 18, after 20 years away. I work 3 days a week as a fisherman and love fishing full-time now. John, my grandfather, introduced me to this line of work. My father was born the year after he married young. Even at my age, my father married young, so my grandfather, who is just 78 years old, is still a small-scale fisherman. He's thrilled to have me back because we used to spend a lot of time together when I was younger. He often takes me out on his little fishing boat now that I'm at home, and before I know it, he asks, "Why don't you take over for me?" He began to introduce me to the fishing industry. Since I had no intention of returning to my previous career, I reasoned that living a lifetime surrounded by nature wouldn't be all that horrible. I agreed right away, and we went fishing. However, it turned out that the years I spent watching my grandfather work and the real work I did were very different. To start with, everything has such an odd fragrance. Furthermore, everything demands a significant amount of physical strength, including cleaning the fish and pulling in the nets. It was difficult, even if at first I was only helping my grandfather, and I secretly complained, "I don't want to do this anymore." However, my grandfather would smile and ask, "Hey, what's with that pathetic look on your face?" When he saw my expression, "You'll never be my right-hand man at this pace. Come on, pull correctly and bend your knees." He always used this as a means of motivation because he knew how competitive I was. When I began taking sports seriously in school, it was the same. "Oh, so you're going to quit just because some old guy yelled at you?" My grandfather would say to me when I was about to give up, even though the coach and practices were quite harsh. "What is there to be proud of, really, when you're not very good at talking or studying? If you give up now, do you really think you'll accomplish anything? Make an effort and complete at least one challenging task." Now that I think about it, it was fairly harsh, basically telling his own grandchild that he was unworthy. My grandfather was correct, though. I think I would have carried a sense of inferiority and felt burdened by the regret of not giving my all in sports or academics if I had given up on the things I wanted to. The lesson I learned from having someone properly chastise me, assessing my shortcomings, and putting forth a lot of effort to close those gaps relates to both job and education. Furthermore, continuing with athletics allowed me to interact with a wide range of individuals of all ages and backgrounds. I believe that's what taught me how to talk to people who were completely different from me. My grandfather, who has always thought of me as awkward and slow, must have known that I would find it difficult to adjust to working life. He was adamant about keeping me in the sports club because of this. His intention was to fortify me. After facing the difficulties of adulthood, I can now truly comprehend his intentions. I was able to focus on my schoolwork later because of the sense of achievement I had from continuing with athletics. I landed a notoriously hard job, but my sports-related perseverance, physical strength, and people skills more than made up for my innate awkwardness. I was working nonstop in the city for a time, but after days of improper sleep, my body and mind began to deteriorate. I had aged prematurely and appeared considerably older than I actually was before I realized it. Despite being in my 20s, I appeared to be in my late 30s. I was fulfilled at the moment, respected by my coworkers, and liked by everyone around me. However, I would say no if you asked me if I would like to travel back in time. I think it's pointless when young people boast about how little sleep they get or how many hours they work, as I hear them do these days. In fact, when I pushed myself too much, my health checkups turned out badly. I resolved to stop caring about professional advancement and save as much money as I could since I was afraid I would become really sick. I turned in my notice of resignation. My managers made several attempts to stop me, but I refused to exchange my health and life for a job. I made a clear decision. I'm working with my grandfather right now to stay busy. Some would argue that even though it's a little more difficult than moderate employment, I'm still young enough to handle it. However, my body at that point would have been that of a person in their late 60s. I reasoned that it would be wiser to step down early and prolong my healthy years rather than wearing myself out while I still had some vitality. I had even heard tales of office workers who disregarded their health, which resulted in the development of cirrhosis and a death sentence in their 50s. My determination was strengthened even more by those tales. I'm okay with that, even if I won't get credit for saving more money or feeling like I've grown personally. Realizing that my greatest wealth is my health, which is also my most important possession. I was inspired to dive into the sea and catch a variety of seafood by witnessing my grandfather do it. I made the decision to become a full-time fisherman for this reason as well. I had to formally become a fisherman by joining the fishing cooperative in order to obtain seafood of that caliber. I consequently acquired the credentials I needed to dive into the adjacent sea and collect seafood, including abalone. There is a flourishing farming community on this island, with lots of fields and rice paddies. We had wonderful fresh food every day and frequently traded different vegetables from the fields for seafood. My existence on the island became rather satisfying in this way. One day, while I was routinely strolling around the port with my fishing gear, I noticed something peculiar floating in the water. A large, pinkish-purple object. What is that? I pondered. It appeared strangely spherical and three-dimensional, unlike ordinary rubbish or clothing. I was staring at it when all of a sudden there was a splash and it began thrashing around. I was shocked to see that the pink object was a little girl, most likely in elementary school. This is not good. If I don't help, she will stink. I started running over the sandy shore after seeing her in such agony. I ran through the dunes and dove into the ocean. I waded through the waves and swam hard in the direction of the girl. I then understood why, when I was younger, my grandfather had hammered swimming into me so hard. Due to the lack of activities in the area, even young children often play by the lake. This kind of accidental seawater drowning occurs frequently, even in cases where parents take precautions. My grandfather trained me how to swim for extended periods of time in deep water, probably so that I would be able to leap in and save someone if necessary. I was really glad I had followed my grandfather's advice as I held the struggling girl and floated at the surface. But the girl was still flailing around, terrified. Hey, you will sink if you continue to struggle. You must become calm. Give up the struggle. She felt like she might escape my clutches at any time, but she was too distraught to hear me. A deep, booming horn suddenly sounded in the distance. Jacob, hello. Hold on to this. My grandfather saw what was happening and quickly sped in our direction in his boat. He threw us a life ring and shouted, "Ah, Grandpa, you're a lifesaver." I turned to the girl and yelled, "Look, help's here now," as I grabbed onto the life ring with all my effort. You no longer need to battle because you will be all right. When the girl finally realized she was safe, she stopped thrashing. At last, I can unwind a little, I thought to myself. I grabbed the life ring and swam toward the boat, which was being towed along. I held the girl as she remained silent and fixed her gaze on a single point, obviously tired from her struggle. I hauled the girl out of the water as we approached the boat, and my grandfather hauled her up with his powerful arms. He exclaimed, "Hey, are you all right?" But the girl remained silent, taken aback by his stern tone. Grandpa remarked, "She might have drank a lot of water," after seeing her silence. "We ought to have her examined just in case. Let's visit the physician." He pulled me up, cranked the engine, and we were back on the beach in no time. I hastened to my belongings and dialed the biggest clinic on the island. After describing the circumstances, a young female doctor who had responded stated, "Let's have a look at her, just to be safe." To prevent the girl from becoming chilly, my grandfather hurriedly asked the locals whether anyone had any children's clothing. My hometown is on a little island. Everyone in this place knows one another as a result, and they constantly support one another. My grandfather was well known to all, and they were all eager to help. But with everyone getting older, it was difficult to locate someone who could fit a young girl in their clothes. Many of the younger families had left the island, and the local school had long since closed. Old children's garments have long since been discarded by the majority of the older people. But after a while, my grandfather finally located someone who might have some. He was given some clothing and a towel that belonged to their son by a couple in their 50s, who were regarded as young on this island. My granddad quickly made his way back to my car's parking spot. He ran back with the boy's clothes, which fit the girl because they were close enough in size. We gave them to her and urged her into the vehicle. We gave her a towel and made sure to cover the windows so she could have some privacy. Dry yourself off here, and take off those damp things. We're going to the doctor after that, I added. The girl had a scared expression. It's okay, I told her, grinning. There won't be anything spooky. Fortunately, it doesn't appear that you're injured. All we have to do is make sure you're okay. She closed the car door quietly, still appearing frightened. She started to dry herself off and change after a little while, and I heard her say, "Thank you," softly. "Whose child are you?" My grandfather questioned her once she had done dressing. She surprised us, though, by claiming she wasn't from the island. It makes sense why I didn't recognize you. How will we locate your parents, then? Grandpa remarked, becoming anxious. The youngster claimed she was here for the first time on a trip with her mother, but she couldn't recall her parents' phone numbers. She couldn't even pinpoint where they had split up. For a few while, we both stood there, reflecting. Her mother has to be searching for her as well. We reasoned that by now she must have contacted the locals and traveled to the police station. We planned to give each other a call later. Maybe the police station had already gotten in touch with us, or maybe we would hear back from the clinic. Keeping that in mind, we went to the clinic to have the girl examined. There once had been an elderly physician who managed the island's sole clinic. He was a skilled yet kind practitioner. But as he grew older, he experienced cardiac issues. He ultimately went back to work after a few sessions, but he gradually cut back on his clinic hours until he was unable to continue. At that point, a young female physician expressed her desire to take over the clinic. It was first questioned if we would be comfortable with such a young-looking, inexperienced doctor, but it turned out that she was about my age. Since none of his children had chosen to become doctors, he chose to commit the clinic to her because of her ability and vast experience. Her arrival was welcomed by the people, who had been concerned about the island's healthcare system's future. Despite its age, the facility exudes coziness because to its soothing wooden construction. Perhaps that's why the girl seemed to loosen up a little as we got closer to the building. The young doctor greeted us warmly and gently as soon as we opened the glass doors. "You must be Jacob, I see. Please enter," she pleaded. After hearing that, I entered the clinic. It had been tastefully refurbished inside. It astonished me. Its big windows and calm wood interior were memories of the place's previous gloomy floors stained black. The old bookshelves had been replaced as well, and were now stocked with senior citizen magazines. Gazing around, I was astounded by how much had changed, and I saw that the girl, who was still a little afraid, was following my grandfather cautiously into the examination room. "Never fear. There won't be anything spooky. You were saved quickly, so I'm sure you're okay." Grandpa patted her back tenderly. As the girl and the doctor entered the examination room, the tension in her face gradually eased. The examination's findings demonstrated that the girl's body was in excellent condition. We were relieved to hear the official outcome, even though we had assured her that everything would be all right. My grandfather called the police station during the exam, and sure enough, her mother had arrived and inquired about her. She had left for the clinic. The girl suddenly brightened when she heard this, giving me her first smile and asking, "Really? I'm grateful." Shortly later, we observed a woman sprinting wildly from outside the clinic toward it. 1. I really apologize. It appears that my daughter upset you. The woman was in her 30s and was panting from running. She was elegant and lovely. She reprimanded her kid before introducing herself as Lily. Hey, did you tell these people your name and thank them properly? She asked, turning to face the girl. The girl abruptly became aware and apologized, appearing to have just realized. Emily is my name. I sincerely appreciate your saving me. In response, my grandfather said, No, no. Everything else doesn't matter as long as she's secure. And didn't you already thank us earlier? That kind of encounter makes you naturally forgetful. Take it easy on her. Lily repeatedly lowered her head and apologized once more. You're Jacob, the one who saved my daughter, right? She asked, turning to face me at that point. Yes, that's right, I answered, assuming the police had told her. I can't thank you enough for saving my daughter's life, she said. I'm not even sure how to show my appreciation. Actually, there isn't a necessity. I simply followed everyone else's lead. No, I can't just end it there. I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't been there, but you saved her life. I sincerely appreciate it. She bowed repeatedly, tears welling up in her eyes. It's true that the girl might not have lived if she had persisted in her struggle. Actually, it happens frequently here that someone falls into the water and never comes back. Lily was probably blaming herself for not seeing her kid when they were close to the water. My grandfather added, At her age, kids are full of energy. As I was at a loss for words. It takes place. But next time, please use more caution. Lily nodded while wiping her tears. Why did you go off to such a dangerous place by yourself? She reprimanded Emily. Emily responded, Well, the men looked like they were having so much fun swimming. Ah. I thought to myself, she must have seen us diving for abalone the day before. She must have reasoned that she could enjoy herself just as much as us if she dove into the sea. She had courage, though, for a child to jump into the water fully clothed, I had to say. We are certified divers with specialized training. The equipment you were wearing is completely different from what we wear. You realize now how dangerous it might be after entering the water while still wearing clothes, don't you? Emily gave a faint nod. I then made her swear that she would never do that again. I claimed it was unnecessary, but Lily gave me an envelope, took Emily's hand, bowed, and walked away. She's quite the adventurous youngster, I thought to myself as I watched them go. She should return and receive the necessary training if she decides to attempt diving once more when she is older. My grandfather laughed as he looked at me after they had left. Aha. With the swimming I taught you, you saved a girl, but you couldn't even get back on the boat by yourself due to your advanced age and inactivity. Child, you still have a long way to go. Hey, let me have a moment. I gave it my all in my response, giving him a little glare. During our chat, I noticed that someone was watching at us. I turned to face the young doctor who had just finished tying up after the exam and inquired, Is something wrong? She was staring at us really closely for some reason. She said, I didn't realize earlier because things were hectic, but your name is John, right? My granddad was questioned by her. Yes, that's right. Well, it's somewhat of a coincidence, but I was shocked to learn that you were John. My name is Mia. Do you still recall me? My grandfather hesitated, thinking, then his eyes widened as she stared right at him. Ah, Mia, from back then. After that, he started telling Mia things from his past. Mia had relocated to the island with her parents when my granddad was considerably younger. Back then, Mia had been a sickly child and frequently missed school, preventing her from attending courses with other students. Even when others made an effort to be kind, she found it more difficult to attend class the more she missed it, and the more alienated she felt from her peers. It was hard to get over that difference. Mia ultimately made the decision to concentrate on getting well and relaxing through middle school in order to enroll in a traditional high school. Even though her parents, who are both doctors, made sure she continued her education, she found it difficult to learn from her family members. Mia cried a lot of days since she was lonely and didn't have any friends at school. While strolling one day, she happened to see my grandfather happily swimming in the sea. Watching my grandfather swim with such abandon made Mia think, it must be so much fun to swim like that. My granddad waved her over after catching her eye. He swam over and started teaching Mia how to catch fish in the shallows when she ran to the edge of the water. She began seeing my grandfather on a daily basis after that, fitting shore excursions in between her coursework. Her parents let her play by the sea since they could tell it was strengthening her. Mia smiled again slowly as she spent more time in the natural world with my grandfather. Through her seashore activities, she also made acquaintances with neighborhood kids, making companions her own age. Mia's face at that point was entirely different from her arrival on the island. The pale, weak kid who had walked nervously while clutching her parents' hands had become a happy, active child basking in the sun. Mia was greeted without any obstacles by the friendly and hospitable island children, even though she wasn't from the island. Mia was able to make friends with them just as readily as she would have with her peers as a result. She told us that the negative emotions she was carrying around from the embarrassment with her peers began to go away because of my grandfather. She felt confident enough to go back to school because she had friends her own age. Her health steadily improved as she played with the island kids more and more. She no longer got sick from running around with them or fell from tiredness. After a while, her parents declared she was well enough to go, and a few days before she graduated from primary school, they made the announcement. After around 2 years, Mia's fun time on the island came to an end, and she returned to her hometown to start middle school. She begged her parents to let her attend middle school on the island since she loved it so much. Her parents, however, forbade it because they knew the island's middle school was failing, and they wanted their daughter to become a doctor. With tears in her eyes, Mia vowed to return to the island eventually. Mia went on to say that my grandfather had given her something more for which she was thankful. She had experienced hopelessness as a young girl, thinking she was forced to follow her parents' instructions. She didn't dislike the notion of being a doctor. Rather, she felt pressured to pursue it because her parents were in the medical field, as though she had no other choice. Even though I had my own will, I couldn't bring myself to say anything because they were my parents, and I didn't want to offend them. It was unimaginable for me to argue with them, because I was always respectful and serious, she remarked. My grandfather said to Mia, who had shown dissatisfaction with her desire to become a doctor, "Look, no parent is going to abandon their child just because they get upset during that period. Granted, some parents are bad, but yours don't seem to be one of those. Did they come to this island specifically for you? For it, they even took time off from work. Few parents would go to that extent. Thus, perhaps if you are sincere with them, things will gradually improve. They may not change their wishes, but if you demonstrate your independence, they will see that you are capable of leading a fulfilling life without becoming a doctor. They will comprehend if they truly love you." Inspired by his remarks, Mia informed her parents that she would choose to attend public middle school rather taking the admission tests for private schools. She later made the decision to become a doctor after discovering, via internet research, that there weren't many medical facilities available on the island. My grandfather appeared shocked, not realizing that this was the reason Mia had come back to the island as a physician. Hearing about my grandfather's prior involvement in her life astonished me as well. My grandfather smiled gently and said, "I see you, Mia. You really did care about this island. It's true that not much remains on this island, and none of us anticipated the arrival of a young physician. It was a major problem when the previous doctor passed away, and everyone was concerned about what the government would do. I assumed they would just send a doctor who didn't want to be here, at random, from a university hospital. But you're not like that, Mia. In addition to being an accomplished physician, You are always so sweet and smiling with the islanders. You are nothing less than a savior to us. For the good of this island, I thank you for pursuing medical school, but I apologize if we have placed too much pressure on you." Mia shook her head and declared that she knew she had to return to this island, whether or not she became a doctor. Being a doctor was really the only thing she could do here, and she was fine with that because the only jobs available are farming, fishing, and medicine. "I'm sorry I cried so much back then, and thank you for always helping me, like that time when I slipped into deep water, or when I tripped over that huge sea cucumber," she continued, her shy but endearing grin on her lips. "Thank you so much for that." Mia appeared sincere in her happiness at seeing my grandfather. My grandfather then grinned and remarked, "Oh, and Jacob used to be a doctor too. Jacob, what are your thoughts? Mia is going to have a hard time managing things by herself. What if you occasionally helped her out in the clinic when you took a vacation from fishing?" At the time, Mia was 35 and I was 38, and we were both unmarried. He was making a point, and I understood it when Mia flushed and replied, "It's true that handling emergencies by myself can be difficult, so I'd appreciate any help you can offer." Despite having retired, I ended up continuing my medical practice because I was unable to refuse. Nevertheless, I was happy that my abilities hadn't declined too much. If I had waited a few years after retiring, things could have turned out differently. It might be too late to help in some circumstances if I couldn't do surgery correctly. It seemed to me that a physician who was unable to provide care for patients who were unable to go to the mainland's larger hospital would be of little use. But things weren't as busy here as they were at my last job, so I thought I could handle it. In addition, I was motivated to assist others in need, which is why I accepted my grandfather's recommendation. Even though there were times a year later when it felt like Mia and I were getting someplace, we never went over that boundary. We still collaborate well as good colleagues at the clinic. Even though things didn't work out romantically, I suppose that's just me. Conversely, my grandfather couldn't contain his disappointment and remarked, "Well, that's a shame. I used to believe that my work was over, but having obligations and receiving gratitude every day gives life a true meaning. I now understand why some elderly people want to work for the rest of their lives, even if they work in chain stores or healthcare facilities. Saying thank you to others and trying to bring smiles to their faces are significantly more satisfying than pursuing my own interests on my own. I think I figured out what matters most in life, thanks to my grandfather and Mia. I go back to the small country clinic today, bearing that in mind."
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office, angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.